Hello, everybody. Nice to meet you here and to see you for this webinar. In a few minutes, I will introduce our guest speaker, Clara Niedt from Impact Hub Berlin. But yes, I hope more people will join in a few more minutes. And at the beginning, I would like to introduce you to the framework that we are here gathered within. This is the Vision Project, another webinar, another event of Vision Project that was started at the very beginning of last year. Different profiles of organizations are present within the project from the beginning, like 14 organizations. These are universities, NGOs, and then private companies presented. And the main goal of the project actually was to advance European capacity and effectiveness in delivering education, in delivering training experience for creativity, entrepreneurship, and learning. And within this framework, we have co-created forward-looking knowledge within the research activities, and also disseminated and created different kind of materials for future educators, for future experts within education. And if you can move to the next slide, please, Clara. Yes. Here you can see our process, actually, the process of the Vision Project, which started with interviewing experts all around the world. These were 150 interviews with stakeholders in education field, in social economy field, technology field, different formats and different profiles of people. And then we have got a large set of data that was supposed to be and was synthesized and analyzed through different kind of internal and external workshops, analysis, and restructuring of results. And at the end, we have a book that is under the last steps of preparation. And at the end of this year, the beginning of next year, we will publish the book, which is called Envisioning the Future of Learning for Creativity and Innovation and Entrepreneurship. And within this book, then if you could move one more slide, please. Yes. In this book, we have compiled different kind of shifts that will be present in just few years, few next years, as we have asked our interviewees and experts how actually the education for creativity, innovation, and entrepreneurship will look like in like 10 years period. And then we have gathered a lot of data and mapped these shifts. And I will not explain all the processes, as you will, after the book is published, we will send you the links to our webpage where you will have the opportunity to see that. But mainly these shifts were clustered into 3 big groups, having these pillars of learning, where we have mapped the processes and described how the teachers and students will transform in the coming years, how the spaces for learning will transform, as well as modes of and styles of learning, for instance, moving to more collaborative and team-based activities for learners. And also the third group was about methods of evaluation, the knowledge sharing, knowledge evaluation, and basically the results of learning. And coming closer to the topic of today's webinar, I would say that many of experts that have been interviewed and took part in our workshops, they have also mentioned this aspect of meaningful learning. meaningfulness, reasonable reason for learning, and the result, of course, should not be only the knowledge gathered, but also the ability to apply this knowledge created through innovation, entrepreneurial, and creative activities. So today I would like to introduce you our one of our experts, the holder of this webinar, Clara Niedt, and she will tell more about her experience in Impact Hub Berlin, developing actually very nice programs for accelerating social entrepreneurship and social innovation, as it was also mentioned by our interviewees, as a very nice way to develop meaningful knowledge and learning outcomes, really for the future solutions to be done, not only knowledge, but tangible solutions done together with customers, for instance, learning stakeholders, and so on. So please, Clara, the stage is yours.
Thank you, Beata. Thank you very much for this introduction. Also really exciting to hear more about your project. I will definitely want to have a look at this book. Yeah, hello everyone from my side. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for your interest in hearing more about how we set up our incubation programs for early stage startups, all in the impact sector. We like to say social entrepreneurship, but of course it also entails the part of sustainability, so more on the environmental side. This is a webinar, so I will talk a lot, but I really invite you to come in with questions at any time to make it a little bit more interactive. So I might not always be observing the chat, but if you have any questions, feel free to just raise your voice and we can see if we can answer the question right away, or if it's more a comment, of course, that's also very welcome. Yeah, I work for Impact Hub Berlin since about 5 years and have been leading a lot of our incubation and acceleration programs. So I am hopefully well equipped to tell you more about our methodology. But before I talk too much about that, I would like to give you some context about our organization. And actually, it's very interesting. I'm here in Impact Hub Berlin, but we are not the only Impact Hub in the world. There's a huge network of more than 100 organizations under this umbrella of Impact Hub. And it's very interesting how we act together. In fact, the network is a bottom-up network. So it means that if founders see in a city that the social entrepreneurship scene is thriving and they have a lot of contacts and they would like to enable innovation in this context, they can apply to be an Impact Hub and set up their own company. So we act operationally independent from each other, but we support each other a lot in exchanging knowledge and contexts and so on. So when you travel, I heard that the Vision Network will also be meeting, for example, in Barcelona. You could visit the Impact Hub in Barcelona and through that get access to a lot of social enterprises through their network. Yeah, and now coming back to Berlin, making it smaller again. This is our mission. So I will just read it out and then explain a couple of things. We provide impact-driven entrepreneurs with tailored support, collaborative co-working, community, and connection to our growing global network. With this combination, they realize, develop, and scale their impact potential. So you can see from this mission that our primary beneficiary group are the impact entrepreneurs. And we are not an educational institution, but we are kind of this center for social entrepreneurship that provides them with the right tools that they need to grow. So ultimately, our work helps the entrepreneurs, and with their work, we can achieve impact on the societal or environmental level. And you can read also from this mission what it is that we do and what it is that we offer. And that is, on the one hand, really tailored support to the startups. but also a co-working space in which we create a very collaborative community for all those people to come together. And these are more than just startups. There's also freelancers inside, or representatives of larger organizations, or from academia, or the political context. So we bring together a very diverse group of people. And as you've seen with all those impact hubs all around the world, it's obviously also very interesting to make the connection to that larger space. And very excitingly, we are now growing very much in our operations, and also moving into a new space with a much larger space for all our community. And we're taking this opportunity to realign also what we do and how we do things. So traditionally, we were offering these incubation programs or acceleration programs for later stage startups, and also more broad innovation projects, most of the time with a kind of design thinking approach, but in a very project based manner. So we would have one client who will say, hey, how about we create impact in this certain sector that might be female empowerment? And then we develop a program, an incubation program, for example, together with this client, and guide the startups through. And then the program will have an end at some point, and we finish up with the client. So it's very project-based. And what we now have seen is that it makes sense with these really big problems that our world is facing, let's say migration, that you cannot look at it just in this linear way. You actually need to take action on a much more systemic level, to really integrate all of these diverse players and their perspectives on the problem, on the challenge that needs to be solved, and then provide the entrepreneurs with access to all of these things. So we are now shifting towards this ecosystem approach, which really has a huge replication for our business model and how we are thinking. So we identified 4 areas that need action now, that I will introduce you to in a second. And we're trying to make up consortiums of partners within these spaces to foster a much more holistic work in that one ecosystem. So it would not only be an incubation program, but it would entail, for example, upfront trend research, then looking into the incubation, and then also adjusting to the different levels of the startups in their development and the kind of partners that they need to meet in the different stages. And then there's also a lot of matchmaking formats to actually bring the people together. So very exciting development also on our side. The 4 areas that we are looking at are circular economy, sustainable food, the green tech industry, and diversity and inclusion. So these are the 4 ecosystems that Impact Hub Berlin is now really focusing on. And I think there will be a way to make this presentation available to you after this webinar, so you can have a look. I just selected some example programs that we already executed in each of those ecosystems. So you can have a look and click on those websites. And a lot of the examples that I will talk about in this webinar come also from the experience of running those exact programs. Yeah, now is the time that we're actually looking at the methodology that we apply. Before I start here, are there any questions from this round concerning Impact Hub Berlin, what we do in general, or the network we belong to?
I've got one question. I'm from De Gruyter Publishers, Clara, says, good to meet you. The opportunities you outlined there, the circular economy, the 3 others, do you know, I mean, how common would they be across other members of the network in other parts of the world?
Yeah, we see a lot of alignment here. Me personally, I'm very active in the sustainable food ecosystem, and we are now setting up a kind of collaboration between several impact hubs to make this happen. For example, also in the UK, this is a big topic, in Amsterdam as well, in some of the Eastern European impact hubs as well. So food, for example, is one that really goes across. Also the green tech one and circularity are big topics. So it's very interesting to see that we identified these focus topics here in Berlin, but they are also very applicable across the board.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. It was also very interesting to have to really put this methodology that we apply into words and define that. So having a first go at this here. One of the pillars that is very important to our work is collaborative thinking. We always say that impactful innovation cannot happen in isolation. So as I explained before, these challenges that we deal with, for example, food or agriculture, they cannot be answered with one answer, and the challenge also cannot be viewed from one perspective. So it needs several players that come together, that help together to solve this. So we want to foster this kind of collaborative thinking among the entrepreneurs as well. They have to understand that it's not about competition, but about collaboration. And when we introduce them to potential partners, this is also the way we want them to think about it, that this is a potential partner and not just a client that you deliver to, but that you go into a conversation with this partner and see what the different perspectives are and how they can add up to each other. So that's very foundational about our work. A second aspect is entrepreneurial thinking. And I like that very much because I also studied traditional business. And we are seeing in our world that the very traditional business approach that really focuses very purely on financial return, it doesn't work out for our planet and the people. But I also see very much the shortcomings of NGOs. In some respect, they do great work, but they also have limitations. So what we are trying to push here is like a new way of thinking in economic terms that have a triple bottom line return. So returns, of course, also in terms of profit, but also in terms of impact for people and the planet. We help the startups that we accompany to define a business model that can realize the impact they want to achieve. So if they want to create good for the people, we also help them find the way that they can create money for themselves by achieving the mission they want to achieve. So this is not about making the most money possible, but making enough money that can be reinvested in the startup, in the company, to grow in itself, to eventually be able to reach more people and more beneficiaries so that the impact grows. So this is a very new type of thinking of social entrepreneurship. It is being pushed on many levels. Also in education, you see that it has become more popular, at least also on the bachelor and the master level, now also on bachelor levels. So people are getting introduced to this form of economy more and more early on in their educational. Then a third pillar or basis of our methodology is the human-centeredness. I mentioned design thinking before. This is very much aligned with it. So yeah, many times when you talk about innovation, people are like, oh yeah, I'm someone that has ideas like constantly. And it's true that innovation results from great ideas. But I have also seen that traditionally, entrepreneurs believe that their idea is so great that they just start to develop a product and a solution, put that on the market, and then through marketing actually push people to buy their product. And this is why maybe we end up with 1 million different types of biros, even though we might not need a new one. So we try to make our entrepreneurs understand that it's important to start from the user or the human that will actually benefit from the solution, and really engage with them to understand what are their needs, how are they going through life, what is their daily routine, for example. And with this very empathetic way of engaging with the user and the human behind this, you can develop a solution that really fits to them. So you have a clear market because you know those people need it. Sometimes those people might not be able to pay for it. Then we relate back to the entrepreneurial thinking, and we help them define a business model that maybe goes over some other organization that has interest in pushing this beneficiary group. But eventually, this type of innovation and solution that is being put forward by the entrepreneur is very applicable, and is also being developed further with time. So the first solution is not the final one, but when you test and develop your prototype further, you will get new insights and you will be able to integrate them into your solution. So with this human-centeredness, you can create very applicable, impactful solutions. And now the last and fourth pillar that I would like to talk about is the type of tailored support that we offer. I think we all know that the entrepreneurial journey is quite a tough one. And we as ISPIM Berlin have a lot of experience in accompanying these startups, and we know what the needs of early stage entrepreneurs are, and we tailor our program support towards these needs. But we also recognize that every entrepreneur might be acting in a very specific case, maybe in an industry that has not a lot of experience yet, so they cannot base, for example, their financial numbers on past experience. So we also, of course, try to offer the possibility to respond to these individual needs. And we create a very caring relationship with them that makes it possible for us to really, or for them to open us up to us, so we can understand what their individual needs are and where we might need to go away from this more general offer of the program, and really offer the possibility for them to talk one-on-one. I will now deep dive a little bit into the way we implement these things. Before that, are there any questions about these 4 pillars, or any specific one of them, or maybe also comments?
Maybe one.
Yeah.
Hi. Hi, Michele here. I'm an entrepreneur myself, and I have a question regarding this, the more generic concept of this social innovations. You were mentioning about the profit, right? So social enterprises have to do a little bit of profit, but just as much, so to say, to be able to reinvest and to grow. So my question is, for this kind of innovations, is there so to say a danger that non-social enterprises will make even more profit and, so to say, outperform the social enterprises in this case? Because I mean, non-social enterprises may have the same let's say domain or target or similar products, but with the non-social perspective in mind, right? So is there a danger for the social enterprises to be outperformed by this non-social enterprises, making maybe more profit on the cost of the social aspects we want to support by having social enterprises?
I think it's true what you say, that they might be making more money, but I'm not sure if the consequence is that they are outperforming the social enterprise. It's also the question of what are you aiming at? What are you aiming for? On which measures do you define outperforming? For example, a social enterprise with the clear goal would actually also set themselves an impact logic and define the way they want to impact the people. And if they achieve their numbers and even outperform their numbers, I think they will be doing great. So it's the question, how do you define outperformance, right? Does it mean like they reach more people? That is maybe one way of defining that. But then there's the question, if you reach more people on the mass, do you still actually have an impact on them? So is it really outperforming them on the impact level? I think it's, you would have to look at it with the radar of like certain criteria.
Thanks.
You're welcome. Any other questions about this or comments? All right. Then let's have a look at how we are trying to implement this methodology and really bring across this kind of thinking that we want to foster among our startups. Yeah, there was another question. No. Okay. I've already talked a lot about our community, and I want to mention this again as the first aspect. There lies really a huge power within bringing people together, and a community is not easily created and then hosts itself. It actually takes quite some work to curate the community, so to select the right people to be part of this community, and then to create the frameworks in which the people come together and to keep that alive. It's really nice to see the kind of connections that come or happen here between very unlikely allies, how we define that. So between people that would usually not come together and talk about a certain topic, but because we create the frame for it, they actually go into an exchange. And that's very interesting to see what happens when these different perspectives come together. And so what we do is to really see that we actively bring the participants of the incubation programs into our community. So we will always, through the partner, sponsor the membership of the social entrepreneur to be part of our community. And we will see to it that there's time in the program, in the schedule of the incubation program, to attend all the community events and to actually go into that exchange. For example, in Germany, it's very typical to do coffee and cake in the afternoon. So when you're kind of reaching that sugar low during the day, we try to bring them all together over some cake and coffee. And that's a great chance to present, for example, your product and ask for feedback on it, or just to see, for example, if you have a crowdfunding campaign running, to advertise that a little bit. So taking these kind of opportunities to come together over food, a lot of times it works really well to bring the people together. Another format that we host here is falafel and feedback. So again, we have the food aspect into it. And then there's more of a smaller round, let's say like 10 participants. And the startup would pitch a certain challenge, and the community would give feedback to that challenge. So they would just write down post-its and exchange and discuss about this challenge. So it's a very nice way to collect feedback. And we have seen that it doesn't only, like the community doesn't only work to as a point of feedback, but also as a wonderful point to get new people on board. So these early stage teams, a lot of times they're still looking for a co-founder, and the community is a very good starting point to look for new employees or co-founders. And we also see that especially in the early phases of starting up, this is very stressful, and it helps the people to know that they have this emotional support from the community, to see that there's more people who care about that type of work, who have gone through the same challenges in the beginning, and can exchange with them, can give them tips, can share opportunities with them, but also just be there and listen to them and let them know that they're not alone in this journey. That helps very much. Yeah, another aspect I think that is quite crucial to how we do that is the power of small cohorts. Really, in order to foster this collaborative or innovative or human-centered way of thinking, or also to be able to provide this tailored support that we want to provide, we believe that small cohorts are optimal. What is a small cohort? I would say that's between 5 or let's say even 3 to 7 startups. It is also interesting if there's a difference between online and offline execution of the program. We have seen that the size stays more or less the same, but it's actually dependent on the way you deal with this small cohort, if you can still create the same type of atmosphere online as we managed to create offline. So the size is still online also, even though it's easier to scale online just to say, let's take another 5 teams inside, it's also recommendable to keep it small. Why am I saying this, or why have we seen that? That's because in small cohorts, you can build a very trusted environment among the peers and also with us. So we actually create this environment in which the startups are coachable, as we say. It's a very interesting feature, or say skill of an entrepreneur, to accept feedback. So if we provide them with knowledge or contacts, we need to make sure that they're actually open to receiving this feedback. And in such a small cohort where there's a very trusted environment, they will be open to these kind of things. And as I mentioned before, we also really provide tailored feedback, or a program that really responds to the individual needs of the entrepreneurs. And also this is only feasible when you have a small cohort, because you understand, you can check in regularly with the teams, you understand what's going on. And on the other hand, you also create a sense of responsibility among the cohort. So they don't think that they are just a number in a large program, but they actually are addressed with their name. And so they will show up to the type of offerings and events that we bring to the table. In a small cohort, it's also very interesting that you can take time in the beginning of the program to define the values of working together. So we will not just come to the table and be like, this and this is the program, will you please follow? But we will actually ask for a way of how they prefer to work, what is important for them. Like, for example, a value would be respectful communication. And then we can create like a kind of agenda or way of working together with the cohort. And this empowers the startups to bring their own creativity to the table and their own way of working. So it's also new for us sometimes, but it makes like a different kind of spice for every program.
Clara?
Is there a question?
Yes.
Please, go ahead.
Hi, Clara, it's Kanika from Wikimedia. I was wondering, when you were talking about small cohorts, how are you working only with like the main people of a startup, like the co-fund or the funder and co-funders only, or is it like do you also offer support and the whole incubation or acceleration program to the whole startup? You know, that is not only this one or two particular co-funders or funders in the room, but you have also the whole project team or startup working all together within the program. Yeah, that would be interesting how you deal with that, and what actually you prefer.
Yeah. Hi, Kanika. It's nice to see a familiar face.
Yeah.
Very interesting question. We usually allow 2 people from the startup into the program. And this is a very practical way also, because if you have a team of 5 people and you say we limit the cohort to 5 startups, but then it's 5 people each, that's still a huge amount of people. And you actually break this kind of thinking of let's keep it in a small circle. So we typically say 2 people. And many times it would be very interesting if at least one of those 2 persons is someone from the founding team, because in the program they will take very foundational decisions regarding the business model, for example, or the type of partners they want to work with. So we need to have someone that can actually take these decisions, so that in a way of like, if it would be someone else in the communication line, these aspects might be lost. It's also interesting to see, you might think that early stage teams, they don't even have more than 2 people. And that's true at some point. Sometimes they are just single founders or like a small team, but sometimes they're also still a huge team because everyone is still very passionate about the idea. And they haven't really yet decided who will work in what in the future. So we typically go with this rule of 2 people. But then there's exceptions, of course.
Cool, thank you.
You're welcome. Are there any other questions towards this? All right. Then I will move on to another aspect. And that's the power of peer-to-peer support. Yeah, this entrepreneurial thinking, or all the input we provide and the contacts that the startups get access to, they don't actually have to always come from us, Impact Hub Berlin, or from the experts that we introduce to the startups, for example, the mentors. It's actually really interesting to see what kind of support can come from the other entrepreneurs in the cohort or from the peers in the larger community. Typically, they have different backgrounds. So not all of them, because they're entrepreneurs, have a business background. They sometimes come also from a chemistry background or someone else from a communications market, very different ones. And we create the type of formats that allow those people to exchange and give feedback to each other. And it's really beautiful to see these connections happen within the cohort. An example or several examples of these peer-to-peer formats are cohort check-ins. I would recommend to do that like once a month in a longer program, at least once a month, to give the space to talk about where you are in the roadmap and what are the challenges that each of the startups is facing right now. And do that not in a one-on-one setting, but do that with all the startups. Because when the others listen in and see like, oh, you need this kind of contact. Oh, well, I have someone in my network that fits perfectly. Or they can, maybe they have a lot of questions about social media and how they can set up their accounts and their brand. And another startup might already be live with their website, with their social media accounts, and give feedback on how that works. Another example of a format that works well is the moment of fame. So when you kind of close, let's say the week or a month, that you invite everyone to share what their moments of fame were. So the moments when they shone, when they really accelerated, and moments that they're proud of for themselves. And that's basically the basis for further conversations. So the startups and the founders, they would know what are the strengths of the other founders, what is that they achieved. For example, we opened our e-commerce shop. And that's the basis for like further checking in and being like, hey, next month I also want to do that. You were so successful doing that last month. Do you want to show me how? So it's very important in our perspective to integrate these type of frames that allow for the exchange between peers, so that feedback doesn't only come from basically someone superior like an expert, but from someone that is on your same level. You accept that feedback in a very different way also. Any questions around that? All right. The last aspect that I kind of want to pick out is the power of course, the skills and the network access that we provide. I read a study that around 75% of early stage startups, so between seed or Series A stage, fail. The journey is a very tough one. You might not find the right product fit or market fit. You might not get customers or partners on board in time. You might not find the right team. That's also a big aspect for failure, to actually bring the idea to life. So it's a very difficult journey, and we know that we understand these needs, and we also respond, as I said, to the individual circumstances and provide the formats that bring across the knowledge that they need or provide the network access that they need to really foster this innovative or entrepreneurial and creative learning. So hard skills and knowledge is transmitted through a number of formats. For example, master classes that would maybe have a plenum input session, and then afterwards a one-on-one session with the entrepreneur and the expert, so they can exchange more regarding the challenges that they face in regards to that topic at the moment. And we have seen now, moving all of our program execution online, that the awareness span online is much shorter than from offline programs. So we have seen that this kind of plenum input is really helpful to be condensed into like 1.5 hour sessions. That is like putting the knowledge across, and then in the one-on-one that maybe also lasts 1 hour, to follow up and see what does this mean, this more general knowledge for me in my circumstance. So that's a format that works really, really well. Another format that we have piloted that fosters, I would say, a lot of creativity is called the outside of the box format. So during that session, the entrepreneurs would discuss an article or a video that seemingly has nothing to do with the topic. But then we see that the participants get very creative in making analogies and transmitting the learnings from this article or the video to their situation. And then we have very active discussions going on, so the people are really engaging. And that's when very creative also ways arise. And the last format to bring across knowledge, really hard skills, that I would like to mention that is maybe not so typical is the mentorship or let's say the jury board. So when we select the startups, we usually have a board that takes the final decision, and this board is made up of people that have experience in the industry but come with different backgrounds. And that type of feedback is very interesting also to pass on to the entrepreneur, because it has different perspectives but is grounded with experience. Yeah, and in terms of network access, we have seen that larger events like demo days do not really lead to the result of making connections. They might create awareness for the startups, but it's not the best way to really create a connection between someone. So we are now going for much more intimate events like fireside chats, or bespoke introductions when we understand the needs of the startup and we are looking for a person that really fits, that can help them further, and we make an introduction and connect the two of them to talk about that specific purpose that was voiced by the entrepreneur. And we see that then the engagement rate is very high. So yeah, also a shift in how you set up the whole program. Are there any questions about this transmitting skills, transmitting or making access, creating access to networks?
I actually have a question. How do you organize, let's say, manage this pool of skills and network while people are participating in these acceleration incubation programs? They are kind of communicating with each other, but what happens next? How they can support each other after the program, or how they are engaged in supporting other people from co-working or the larger network?
Very interesting. Yeah, we of course try to encourage them to stay active in our community. So they would also be able to access sort of matchmaking events that we host after the program. Then we see also that many times the entrepreneurs actually take the connections that they made during the program further on their private level. So many times a mentor that we matched with a startup has become an advisor in the company and stayed active. Then we host also alumni events, so really getting them all back together, sometimes even in person, to see what are the latest developments, how could we still engage with them. Or they reach out to us and say, hey, we are now going to the next program, could you write us a letter of recommendation? And then we stay in touch. So we get the news from them, like what are the next steps, but we also hear from them if they have a need. For example, now a startup that ran in the past through our program is launching a crowdfunding campaign, and they will come back to actually present that crowdfunding campaign at the Kaffee and Kuchen, the coffee and cake event. Even though they are not anymore in the program, they still have access to that, and they can still like present it to the rest of the community. So there's a lot of different ways how we stay in touch and how we still make it possible for them to access this power of the community.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Then I would like to come to a closing and share also again how this shift towards the ecosystem way of approaching things is a very continuous, or is an example of how we as an organization also very continuously learn. So we have seen that, these challenges cannot, or these systemic challenges cannot be answered by this more project-based phase. So we are really shifting our business model and reorganizing also internally to make way for this more holistic approach. And I think, as I mentioned here on the slide, it's the response to many things we actually preach. So it's nice to be able to say we are trying at least to walk our talk, to respond to the needs of the different stages of startups, to respond to the systemic level of challenges that the world is facing. And to be able really to foster more connections between the people that are part of our community. If you have questions in the future, please feel free to note down my email address and you can reach out. And if you're interested, you can also follow us on social media, or you can go on our website and adopt our newsletter. So once a month, you will be made aware of the type of programs that we are launching or running, the type of community events that are happening, and so on. So this is a nice way to stay up to date and also to stay in touch.
Thank you very much, Clara. It was really nice to see that community-based approach that you are developing. So maybe there are questions from listeners now. I think it's time.
Maybe I have one question.
Yes, please.
What would you say is the most important difference between the social incubator as you are and the normal one, or let's call it unsocial incubator?
I think the underlying idea is really to recognize the special needs of a social entrepreneur and that willingness to think in a different way. Because it's very easy to live with the traditional business. It's very easy to measure these kind of things. Hey, have you improved your margin, for example? But when you support social entrepreneurs, you need to think on that impact level as well. So we help them not only define the right business model that might not only also be like the traditional business client and then partner, but might actually go like over a third organization. And then we also next to that help them define the impact logic. So we really question also, is that really the ultimate target you want to have? And if yes, so how can you relate that back to your actions? Like, are you as a company taking the right steps to be able to achieve the impact that you want to achieve? So yeah, responding to these needs of a social enterprise.
Mm-hmm. Thanks.
Yeah, I also got a question. Hey, I'm Ivo. I'm a master student at KIT, and I'm doing research with impact startups. So I was wondering, are you doing or using some tools to do impact measurements with those startups, or what kind of approach do you follow with like this kind of impact? Do you quantify it? Do you measure it, or is it not a focus in this early phase?
Yeah, we have tried out several tools. I think the ultimate one is still not there. And typically we work a lot with the Fineo approach that might be familiar to you. I think that impact logic is very well thought through. And generally, impact measurement always needs to take both a quantitative and qualitative approach. So yes, you want to report on numbers. So you want to, for example, say how many beneficiaries did we reach, but you also want to be able to tell that stories, because if, for example, more girls in Ghana got access to education, it's cool to say like 5% more girls are being educated. But then you want to tell the story of what does that mean for their family. Maybe you need to also observe that over a long time frame. Maybe because they went to school, they will provide a very different life to their children. And that really changes in the way they live as a family, and then will also contribute to the economy and so on. So it needs both. It needs the quantitative, but also the qualitative way. Yeah,
thanks for your answer. So you also think that like this theory of change and like impact chain and stuff like this is really important, especially also like to give it to the founders in the first place, like beginning of their journey? Yeah,
definitely. This is also, I think, in almost all our programs, a very basic thing that we guide them through the setup of this logic and help them implement it. It's a great tool not only for the enterprise for internal planning, but also then for marketing, right? Like how do you report on that? You don't only report for the purpose of your investors seeing the numbers, but you also want to make your followers aware of the type of impact you create. And the impact logic is a great way to do that.
Okay, thanks a lot.
You're welcome.
I also had a question. Could you please tell how do you select coaches, mentors, and how do you really technically engage them into work with entrepreneurs? And also the second question, if I may speak, how do you engage NGOs and what are the skills they really provide for your acceleration programs and incubation?
Thank you. For the mentors, we typically do like a self-assessment with the startups before they join the program to see where they have needs. Of course, also in the selection process already, we understand what is the gap that they have. Do they need help more with the financial part or the business model part, or is it a technical need? And then we try to select the mentor accordingly. So are they coming from the industry, maybe the same industry, and can provide network access? Or do they come from another industry but share the level or have like experience in the topic that the startup is seeking support in? And then we select accordingly. So we usually try to shortlist a couple of options for startups and then approach these people. And we have a very big trusted pool of mentors that makes it possible to select from. And the second question is a very interesting one. How do we collaborate with NGOs? Not enough, I would say. I think Fineo might be an association, for example, or an NGO. So we don't directly collaborate with them. In fact, in the past, representatives from Fineo have been part of our community. So they were using our co-working space as well and being available for check-ins and conversations. But now I'm basically using their methodology to introduce the startups to impact measurement. So this is one way, but it's not a very active way, I would say. Also here with you, right, I'm like giving this talk and trying to spread a little bit the word about what we do and how we do things. So this would be maybe one way, but I would like to make it more active. The types of collaborations. For example, of course, we could also select a representative from an NGO as a mentor or someone to come and give a talk in one of our fireside chats. But these are also like more one-off engagements then. So it's very interesting to think more in that type of way.
Would you say that private companies, entrepreneurs are more active in supporting your social entrepreneurs than NGOs?
Let's see. For example, also foundations are very active in supporting social entrepreneurship, at least in Germany. Also, the government has quite a lot of offers. So it's not only private companies. Then it's also the question of what are the means of an NGO. Maybe what they're good at is also to create a sort of impact logic, or they have a far reach, and then we might collaborate with this kind of thinking in mind.
Thank you. Are there any other questions from participants? Okay, if there is no question, then we can close the event. Thank you very much, Clara, for explaining and sharing your practices. It was inspiring for me personally, and I hope it will inspire others to develop similar programs within projects or on their private or professional paths. But for now, we'll add this webinar to our repository and share with more people so others can also see and hear you in action. So let's follow your accounts in Facebook, including, and see how it develops further. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, it was great having this opportunity to speak to you, and thank you for all the questions and the engagement.